Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready to unlock the secrets to learning English quickly and effectively? We're diving deep into the best strategies today, using two really interesting sources.
Should be fascinating.
We're going to be taking a close look at an Arabic article that has, wait for it, a unique story-based approach to learning English from scratch. And we'll also be touching on some timely tips from the Mayo Clinic on staying healthy.
Because, let's be real, nothing throws you off your game like getting sick.
Okay, so you're ready to jump into the world of English, right? This Arabic article we found has a really cool approach, and it all starts with this idea of, get this, activating your listening. They're talking about immersion, surrounding yourself with the language as much as possible.
And what's really interesting here is that it's not just about passively hearing the language, like having it on in the background. It's about actively engaging with it.
So how do you do that?
Well, think about it this way. How do children learn their first language?
They hear it constantly.
Right, exactly. They're constantly bombarded with sounds, words, and phrases. And over time, their brains, they kind of naturally start to decode the patterns, and they make sense of it all. That's what we're trying to replicate with immersion.
Right, so it's like more than just having the TV on in English or something. You really want to be actively listening, paying attention to the sounds, the rhythms, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting because the article emphasizes this idea of speaking from day one, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, so instead of waiting until you feel ready to speak, they're saying, just go for it.
Exactly. Don't wait. This is where the concept of active recall comes in. It's a really powerful learning technique that involves actively retrieving information from memory. Now, the article doesn't get into the research on this, but studies have shown that we learn better when we actively use information.
As opposed to just like passively listening to it or reading it.
Exactly. So by actually speaking the language, even if you're just talking to yourself at first.
Right, like who are you going to judge?
Exactly. You're forcing your brain to work harder. You're forcing your brain to retrieve those words, those grammatical structures, and that helps you retain the information better.
And so it's like you're not going to wait until you're a marathon runner before you start going for jogs.
Precisely. Start small, start simple, but start speaking.
I love that. So we've got immersion, we've got speaking from day one. What else?
Well, this leads us to another point that I found really insightful. The article talks about not getting too bogged down in complex grammar rules right away.
Oh, thank goodness.
They really emphasize this idea of focusing on using the language in practical, everyday contexts.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
What do they recommend?
Well, they actually get really specific here. They recommend focusing on learning phrases that are very commonly used in conversations, like, hello, how are you? Or, I would like a coffee, please.
So practical stuff, instead of memorizing every single verb tense.
Exactly. Start with the ones you'll actually use on a daily basis. And this approach, it aligns with the idea of implicit versus explicit learning. Have you ever heard of that?
I have, but I bet some people haven't.
Sure. So implicit learning, that's more intuitive. It's about absorbing information through exposure and practice, like how we learn grammar naturally just through speaking a language. Then there's explicit learning. That's where you're consciously focusing on those rules, those structures. That's more effective, really, once you have that solid foundation to build upon.
So, to put it simply, immerse yourself in the sounds of English, speak from day one, and don't stress about perfect grammar right out of the gate.
Got it. What else does this treasure trove of language learning advice have for us?
Well, and this is important. They talk about finding your people.
Finding your people.
Your language community.
Yeah.
Connecting with native speakers, connecting with fellow learners, to practice with, to reinforce those skills you're building.
Because let's be honest, learning a language is way more fun when you're not doing it alone.
Right, May?
Absolutely. And more effective, honestly. There's a different kind of energy when you're learning with others, sharing that experience.
They even suggest checking out online language exchange platforms, those websites and apps where you can connect with people from all over the world who are learning your language and you can help each other out. Have you ever used any of those?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I think these platforms really illustrate the article's emphasis on, not being afraid to make mistakes. Because when you're interacting with someone who understands the challenges of language learning, there's a sense of, camaraderie and support.
It takes the pressure off.
Exactly.
And it reinforces what we were saying earlier about active recall, right? The more you use the language in these real conversations, even if they're a little messy at first, the more those neural pathways are going to get stronger.
It's all about building those connections, both linguistically and, I'd argue, socially. because language at its heart is all about communication.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already. We talked about the power of immersion, the importance of speaking from day one, not letting grammar intimidate you, and the value of finding your language learning tribe.
It's a holistic approach, really.
I like that. It's not just about memorizing vocabulary lists. It's about creating this whole environment where you can thrive as a language learner.
Exactly.
You know, it's funny. We're talking about all these amazing language learning strategies, but there's this one thing that can totally derail your progress: getting sick.
Oh, tell me about it.
It's the worst, right? You're finally hitting your stride with your language learning, and then bam, you're down for the count with a nasty cold.
It's true. Maintaining your health is absolutely crucial for effective learning. If you're not feeling well, your focus, your energy levels, they all take a nosedive.
It's like trying to run a marathon with a sprained ankle.
Exactly. And unfortunately, as the Mayo Clinic reminds us, it's flu season, which means those pesky viruses are circulating.
And speaking of the Mayo Clinic, their article on influenza prevention is our second source for today.
Because of course it is.
Right. It might seem a little off topic, but trust me, there's a method to our madness here.
I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
Okay, so think of it this way. Every hour you spend recovering from the flu is an hour you could have spent mastering those English verbs, right?
I like the way you think. So we're talking about staying healthy as a key part of your language learning journey. I'm on board.
Me too. So first things first, what exactly is the flu?
Okay, so the Mayo Clinic describes influenza as a respiratory virus.
Which means?
Which means it affects your nose, your throat, and your lungs. And it spreads through those tiny droplets that get released into the air whenever someone who's infected coughs or sneezes.
Okay, that makes sense. And I guess that's why they always tell you to wash your hands, right?
Exactly. Hand washing is like the superhero of flu prevention. The Mayo Clinic actually recommends washing your hands for at least 20 seconds with soap and water.
20 seconds. That's longer than I usually do it.
I know, right? It
Yeah.
seems like a long time, but it makes a difference. And it's especially important after being in public places where you're more likely to have come into contact with those germs. The whole point is to physically remove the virus from your hands before it can enter your body.
So you're not giving it a chance to hitch a ride. Got it.
Exactly. Now, another thing they emphasize is avoiding close contact with people who are already sick.
Well, yeah, duh.
It seems obvious, but you'd be surprised how often we put ourselves in these situations.
Oh, I know. Like you're at work and your colleague is practically coughing up a lung, but they're like, oh, no, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Right. And you're like, no, you are not fine. Please go home.
Exactly. And that's where setting boundaries is so important, right? You have to prioritize your own health, even if it means excusing yourself from a social gathering or suggesting a video call instead of an in-person meeting.
Absolutely. You have to look out for number one sometimes, you know. And on that note, let's talk about the flu shot.
Okay, the flu shot. The ultimate weapon in our flu-fighting arsenal.
The Mayo Clinic highly recommends getting vaccinated annually, and they actually do a really good job of explaining the science behind it in a way that's easy to understand.
So remind me again, how does it work? It's something about tricking your body into thinking it's sick, right?
Yeah, it's like a sneak preview for your immune system. So the flu shot contains either a weakened or inactive form of the influenza virus. And when you get vaccinated, your body sees this foreign invader, even though it's not dangerous, and it starts producing antibodies to fight it off.
So it's like a dress rehearsal for the real deal.
Exactly. And the beauty of it is that if you do happen to encounter the actual flu virus later on, your immune system is primed and ready to fight it off.
Which means you're less likely to get sick.
Got it. Okay, so by protecting ourselves from the flu, we're essentially protecting our ability to learn English as well. Think of it that way, yeah. A healthy body supports a healthy mind. And a healthy mind is ready to learn. It's all connected.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got our language learning plan, right?
Right.
Immerse yourself in English as much as you can. Don't be shy about speaking from day one, even if it's just to yourself or your dog. And remember that grammar mastery, well, that takes time.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. Oh, and we can't forget, find your people, those fellow language enthusiasts who make the learning process way more fun.
Your tribe. Your cheerleaders.
Exactly. And just as important, we talked about taking care of your health. Because a strong immune system, well, it creates a strong learning environment.
Absolutely. Your brain needs all the energy it can get to absorb all those new words and phrases.
It's like we always say, healthy body, healthy mind. And that brings us to the million-dollar question. What's the one thing you can do, like today, to jumpstart this English learning journey?
You know, what I love about that Arabic article is that it really emphasizes these small, consistent actions. They're saying you don't have to become fluent overnight. Start small.
Okay, I like that. What does that look like?
Well, maybe today you put on an English song that you like and you actually read the lyrics while you listen.
Okay.
Tomorrow, maybe you challenge yourself to order your coffee in English.
I love that.
Little by little, these actions, they add up. They create momentum.
It's like that old saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So no matter where you are in your language learning adventure, whether you're just starting out or you're feeling a bit stuck, just remember, every step counts.
Every single one. And be kind to yourself along the way, right?
Yeah.
Celebrate your progress, no matter how small it might seem.
Because consistency is key.
It really is.
Becoming fluent in a new language, it's like running a marathon, not a sprint. But you know what? With the right strategies, a healthy dose of motivation, and maybe a flu shot or two along the way.
You got this.
You got this. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We'll catch you next time, folks.
See you later.